This is John Walton, and you're listening to the Powerplay Point podcast with the Blue Liner on points and Anna Knox. Here's Wilson, and on the right circle, he scores!
Rebound loose, wild scramble in front, score! Ovechkin with a buzzer beater! It'll count!
And the hat trick tonight, number 21,
Hello and welcome once again to the Powerplay Point podcast. This is your host, the Blue Liner on Point, talking to you live to tape from downtown Glen Burnie, Maryland. And it's another week of action we're talking about here for our Washington Capitals. Mermaid is on vacation, and I have enlisted the services of a very special co-host who I will introduce here in a moment. But before we get into that, just want to remind everyone we'll have extra commentary on this in another segment of the show, but I do want to remind everyone we are dedicating this week's episode to the memory of Pete Medhurst, of course called Nats baseball, Navy football, Navy athletics of all kinds, dedicating this episode to his memory. So we're going to be talking about what he meant to some of our listeners and what he meant to Maryland sports in general. But we're going to introduce our co-host now. He's graciously consented to be with us. Some of you out there, you on the other side of the speakers, the earbuds, what have you, may already be, should already be familiar with his work. If you're a Caps fan who likes to keep up with things, he is on the current host of the Locked On Capitals brand podcast that comes on every day, and the Minutecast podcast that comes on as well. So just going to bring him in now, Mr. Dan Holmi. Dan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks again for coming on with us. I was scrambling for somebody to be on with, and if for those who don't know, I've actually had the pleasure of being on your podcast several times, and it kind of hit me a few days ago. Well, why not have a guy who basically covers more angles than a geometry textbook when it comes to Caps to come on and kind of break down what's been a pleasing and yet simultaneously frustrating somewhat turn of games for the Caps recently. And when we break down the games here, I think everybody will understand why I'm putting it that way. I couldn't think of anyone better, and because of the time period they're in, and so because of that, I want to thank you again. But let's go ahead and introduce you in our own way, of course, to our listeners out there. So I understand you're out in Minnesota. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that leads me to our first big question. I don't know if you've been out there your whole life, but how did you get started in being a Caps fan?
Oh, well, to be honest with you, I wasn't that big of a hockey fan when I was younger. And at the time, we didn't have a Minnesota team. As you know, the Minnesota North Stars went to Dallas, and then the Minnesota Wild, all of that. Just a Capitals fan, I just started watching some of their games. And I've just been a fan ever since. I don't really have a great reason. And sometimes people are asking, or they're looking for a great reason why. I guess that initially, Ovechkin was in the beginning of his career, and that was very captivating with a lot of young players. And like I say, it's an interesting state. There are a lot of fans that are fans of like the Blackhawks, that are a fan of the Blues, that, the Minnesota Wild is the big team of the state here. But like I say, when I first started following hockey, they didn't have a team at that time.
Okay, so it was around as far as the win, you would say it was around the time Ovechkin started his career. Does that sound about right?
Ballpark. It was a little bit before then, and to be honest with you, it was more casual to start out with. Just and then all of a sudden the fandom kind of grew to the next level, and it's interesting. Before I got into podcasting, I had web pages, Facebook pages, Facebook groups, and my wife, she would ask me, why do you do this? Why do you, as sometimes people don't feel the need to be connected with a team, but I always, I felt like I was a big fan and I wanted to be connected somehow. So I had those pages. And then there was a thing that came out that by the podcast company Spreaker. And I saw that on my Facebook feed. And it said, start your own podcast for free. And I'm like, well, I've been a big fan of podcasts. I'm an audio guy. I listen to talk radio, that kind of thing. I'm going to try this whole thing out. And I didn't tell my wife about it because I didn't want to be that, standard, I hate to say it, arrogant person that has his own podcast. I mean, how crazy is that? And so I didn't tell her about it. And I'm a fan of a football team, a baseball team, and I just, dabbled in it. And like, I had no idea where this is going to go. And, I had one out for my football team, the baseball team. And as far as the Capitals, recording it on my cell phone, in my car, on my lunch break at work, and just, working on it and gaining some affiliations with some different people. And it grew from there. I was on the Hockey Podcast Network briefly. And then one day, one of the producers from Locked On said, do you want to try out for Locked On Capitals? And I said, well, sure. So, I've been podcasting since about 2021. And it's just about taking my fandom to the next level. Obviously, I'm a passionate Capitals fan. And, you get to be pretty well read on the team just by doing a podcast about them 5 days a week. That's your mission, is to cover all the aspects of the team. I guess I feel lucky that I got the opportunity to host the show. It's been a great opportunity. I've had a great, chance to meet some big names in the Capitals broadcasting realm. That it's been a fun ride so far, and I look to see where it's going. But yeah, that's how I got my start anyhow.
Awesome. Kind of curious, being a fellow podcaster, is this your main job, or is this a side gig, or how is that working for you?
It's the equivalent to what they would say a side hustle, I guess you could say. It doesn't pay my mortgage, shall we say, but they do pay me. That combined with the other podcasts that I do, it accounts for part of my income, but it's definitely not to the point where it's something that I can live on yet.
Okay, well, that's definitely a goal of anyone who aspires to be a full-time podcaster, as do most of us. That isn't already a celebrity that's doing that. So that kind of I have to ask this of everybody, but so I'm going to ask this of you. So given all of that, what do you do for the almighty paycheck?
I work in retail. I work in a hardware store. And, it's something that I've done for quite some time. I worked for quite a major hardware retailer here in the Midwest area for 23 years. And I had some changes in my life. I got married. I have a couple kids. My wife is a registered nurse. So I was a manager at the other job that I working like 50 hours a week. And that gets old in a hurry, doing that for many years. So my wife making, more money than I do, I didn't have to necessarily do that. So it definitely lends itself to me doing podcasting, that kind of thing. Plus, being a full-time dad. I mean, I have 2 girls that are 3 and 5 years old. So it is, awesome. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I can, I can certainly attest to that, being a girl dad myself. Mine's grown.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, you don't ever stop with that. And fairly quick here before we get started, what would you say is your favorite Caps memory?
My favorite Capitals memory, I guess, I would say when they won the Stanley Cup, because I was watching it on television with my wife, and I'm a bit of, I'm a skeptic. I'm definitely a glass half empty kind of guy. I'm fighting that. And I didn't think they were going to do it. I really didn't think they were going to win the Stanley Cup until it happened. And she just kind of looked at me and said, "I told you it was going to happen." And I just sat there quiet for a long time because I saw the struggles with Columbus, with Tampa, with Vegas. And, I kept telling myself the different rounds that they went through. I'm like, well, okay. I mean, they struggled with Columbus, and there's no way they're getting through Tampa. I mean, you see how good Tampa is. And then, they get to the final round and it's against Vegas. I'm like, okay, this has all been real here, but it's, okay. But it happened. And, it's kind of like one of those moments where you kind of pinch yourself at first. Because it seemed like for the longest time, you take a look at Alex Ovechkin for a while. He was always seen like, yeah, you're a great goal scorer, but you haven't won a cup yet. So that was that look of disbelief on his face when they finally, you know the one I'm talking about, where he's sitting on the bench, hands in his, and kind of in disbelief that it finally happened. That, was probably my favorite one. But a lot of great Capitals memories as well. I live in Minnesota, but on my 40th birthday, the wife took me down to was called Kettler at the time, which is now MedStar Ice Complex, and got a chance to go to the morning skates. I went to they were playing the Kings, I remember, and I think it was a shutout. I also went to a couple Hershey Bears game in Hershey, and then up in New York as well. So those are my great memories. Getting a chance to see some of the players, Alex Ovechkin up close, walking out of Kettler at the time. There's a lot of great memories, but those are the couple that come off to the top of my head.
Awesome. Okay, wonderful to hear. All right, well, let's go ahead and break down the games now. Typically we focus on one game. Well, kind of difficult to do this week because these were three very different games. So let's just go ahead and do them in order. First one, of course, was this past Tuesday, the 21st, at the start of the road trip that they're on in Edmonton against the Oilers. So let's jump into the scoring. First period, 3:02 in. Leon Draisaitl, no surprise there, his 34th. Darnell Nurse and Podkolzin on the assist on that one. So a quick start for the Oilers on that one. Pretty good answer, though. Didn't waste too much time answering. Almost 6 minutes exactly to the second. Tom Wilson becomes a 20-goal scorer again in his career. Protas and Carlson on the assist for that one. So we end the period tied at 1. Second period, Matt Roy on a great point shot that manages to squib past the goalie Skinner's pads for his second of the year. Dubois and McMichael on the feeds for that one. And then Dubois himself gets his 9th. He's had a pretty hot couple of weeks here, as Dan, you've mentioned on your last couple of episodes. Eller and Logan Thompson, his first point as a Cap on the assists on that goal, which happened at 3:49 at the third period. So Caps with a 3-1 lead going into the halfway or going into about 15 minutes left, and then about a minute later, Corey Perry answers. Draisaitl on the assist for that one at 4:50. And then it was, hold on to your seat time, bite your nails time for the rest of it, as the Caps would hang on for the win. Now, the painfully key stat on this one, you need to look no further than the shots on goal. 14 for the guys in white. 32 for the Oilers. 32. You do the math. You cut that in half, they still outshoot the Caps. That's not good. Period. I don't care who you are. I don't care what lineup you throw out there on the ice. That is never a good thing. Now, you managed to get the win. That's great. But why this bothers me so much is because it is far from the first time I've seen this. We've talked about this many, many times on this, and it's talked about a lot on yours and other podcasts, I'm sure, Dan. So I have to ask you, you see this stat, what do you think?
Well, it's like what Spencer Carberry talked about. They're not generating enough opportunities. We saw them changed that in the game against the Kraken here most recently, but it's generating opportunities. And also, it was a really good Oilers team, and it was a great Oilers team minus Connor McDavid. So they just have a lot of great scores on that team. And, ultimately the Capitals walk away with a 3-2 victory there. But it's one of the games, and I'm recollecting back on it because I don't have my notes loaded for that one, but that one came right down to the wire where it could have definitely gone the Oilers' way in that one. So it was, it's one of the things that the Capitals have to work on. And I think for sustainability that they're going to have to generate more opportunities and, do the things that gave them success earlier in the season. Hang out in front of the net, good things will happen. Those greasy, dirty goals, look for second, third opportunities, deflections, those kind of things. That has been all a part of the secret sauce for the Capitals. But the players scoring goals in this game, PLD, who I talk about on my show, has been an absolute godsend for this team. If we take a look back, that was that move that everyone scoffed at. Oh my God, the Capitals traded for that guy. He has an 8-year deal. And he's a cancer in the locker room. Well, how great has PLD been for the Capitals this year? And I'm going to take a bold take here, not so much, that the Capitals would not be in the position that they're at right now if it wasn't for PLD. He has taken Connor McMichael's game to the next level. Tom Wilson's game, he sees the ice very well, huge in that game. Tom Wilson finding the back of the net as well. Double-digit goals right now for Tom Wilson as well, the future captain of the team, make no mistake about it. And also a unique thing in this game was Matt Roy, a guy that doesn't have a real great offensive flair, found the back of the net as well. So again, Capitals need to generate more opportunities, and had it not been for LT, Logan Thompson, I definitely think the Oilers could have skated away in victory lane.
Yeah, this I agree. This one was definitely a nail biter. I kind of thought, given both teams' ability to put the puck in the net, that it would be either a blowout or a shootout. Either way, I would not have counted on such a tight game, a tight, relatively low-scoring game. And now I do have to admit that when the deal was announced for Pierre-Luc Dubois, I was one of those skeptics who probably came close to either a coronary episode or hitting the ceiling when I heard that, because I kind of had. I was kind of a bit of a Darcy Kemper fan, whom he was traded for, but also I had heard and seen the horror stories of his not being the ideal teammate. So I was not anywhere near sold on this deal until I saw him play for the first, say, 5 or 6 games. And not only has he proven to be everything that you said, Dan, but he's also proven to be a surprisingly physical presence at times, which, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, he is a huge dude. And, you think about it, having Protas, we've seen him on the line, and Wilson, that is a force to be reckoned with, and I know the lines have changed a little bit, but we've seen Protas, we've seen PLD and Tom Wilson on the same line. And to just kind of exemplify that in a post-game interview, it was Al Koken and Alexei Protas standing next to each other, just towering guys. Now, I'm 6'5" myself, but those guys are built like brick shithouses, and I'm not built like those guys are. So I think that is part of the secret sauce of the Capital success, is go ahead and try to steal the puck away from those guys. Go ahead. You're not going to have a lot of success. And, you can be just this big hulking, inept hockey player, but they're not. They're top level goal scorers. PLD, like I said, but also Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson often gets put in the bin of a goon, a tough guy. Well, go ahead and tell that to Rempe. Tell that to Reeves. How many goals have they put up on the season? That, Tom Wilson on the Break the Ice podcast with Mike Vogel said, I'm getting to the point of my career where I realize I'm better served on the ice. I don't need to answer to every fourth line AHL call-up. I'm a legitimate goal scorer. And I think that ruffles a lot of the feathers with NHL people, that we know in the DMV area what he means to the Capitals, right? But if you're a Flyers fan, a Rangers fan, you're like, oh, that guy, he's just a tough guy. There's not one of the other 31 teams out there that wouldn't kill to have a guy like Tom Wilson.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of many reasons why he's a favorite of the show. especially of our temporarily vacationing co-host Anna Knox. Definitely one of her favorites for sure. But yes, you're right. He does have that unicorn-like combination of skill and toughness that every GM just salivates over, and we're very lucky to have him had that cultivated with our franchise. Okay, let's go ahead. You know what? I just remembered. You mentioned Al Koken and Ilya. Just saw his brother in a highlight. Alexei Protas. You just reminded me of that hilarious intermission interview where Protas crouched down. I hope everybody saw that. Protas actually crouched down so he wouldn't look so tall next to Al Koken. I don't know if you had a chance to see that video or not, but
I did. That's what I was referencing, and I think it actually made Al Koken feel worse. He's like, "No, stand up. You're drawing more attention to me." But yeah, it was a funny moment though to look back on that game. But all things considered, I'm taking a peek at the standings, and things are moving around a little bit. The Oilers right now are in first place in the Pacific right now. So, it's a team to be reckoned with. 65 points, the Golden Knights with 64 points. This is must-win hockey. I'm talking about that in tomorrow's show, that you take a look at the Capitals, and, we can talk about that later as well. The big acquisition that the Carolina Hurricanes made, that was really a shot across the bow of the Capitals. We're reflecting back on these past games, and all things considered, painting it with a broad brush, the Capitals played well. This is real right now. The Capitals are doing well right now, but they got to buckle up and really, take the screws to the Flames who are on deck.
absolutely. And it does make me feel better, even though, as far as a possession or output standpoint, it wasn't the prettiest game that they did beat a first place team. However, they managed to accomplish that. So that does make me feel a little better, but even so, they have to find a way to generate more chances, as you said. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next game of the week, which was Thursday up in Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle against the Kraken. So running down the scoring here. Okay, I don't want to waste any time on this, not too much time on this, but the first goal of the game um, was technically scored by Alexei Protas, but it's also listed as an own goal. I really, really wish the NHL would decide what the deal is here, because in my mind, and I'm something of a soccer fan. In my mind, you cannot have an own goal, and you cannot also credit said own goal to a person. It's one or the other. It can't be both. And since it matters in the individual statistical categories with the league, why not just credit it to the player? Why get rid of this own goal business? I don't know why they do that, but either way, first goal goes in on a lucky bounce for the Caps at 4:36 off of Protas into the net behind Joey Decourt. That's actually 4:36 of the second period. There's no score in the first. And then at 18:05, Ethan Frank, his third of the season, his third with his stint with the Caps ever since joining them over a week and a half ago, unassisted. Great hustle on this play, not unlike when he negated the icing against Montreal in his first game. But great hustle with the puck, goes in practically alone on Decourt, gets a shot in, gets the rebound, and then puts it away for his third of the season again at 18:05 of the second, gives the Caps a 2-0 lead. And then the captain, of course, ices it with his 22nd. It's an empty netter. Van Riemsdyk and Chychrun on the assist for that one. 16:32. Seattle took a bit of a gamble, pulling the goalie early to try and get back into it, but not to be. The shot stats, well, much better. This was obviously given, scoreboard says it a little bit, but the shots say it as well. Possession, all the stats down, up and down the board. Very much a complete game. Probably you could argue the most complete game the Caps have played, top to bottom, minute 1 to minute 60. Just great effort at both ends of the ice. Charlie Lindgren, his first shutout of the season, got all 22 Seattle shots, face-off dot 61.5. Nothing to hate on this game. Caps led the way with 15 shots alone in the first period. So obviously they meant business. Now Seattle have had their struggles, but I didn't think this had a potential to be something of a trap game, given that they had beaten Edmonton in such a tight game in their previous outing. What were your thoughts after this game, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what you think there. It could have been a trap game. And oftentimes the Capitals have struggled playing down to teams or playing to teams that aren't as good as them. Oftentimes it seems like they can rise to the occasion. And I think, a lot of that is a subconscious thing. I don't think they're going into it with a thought process that, these guys suck and we're just going to plow over them. I just think it's a subconscious thing that these teams aren't as good. But you take a look at the Seattle Kraken, that is another team that's kind of flailing, based on taking a look at the standings where they're at right now. And I think that, a lot of people thought that the Kraken were going to follow in the same category as the Golden Knights, great things in a hurry. That team has struggled. But just my recollection on that game was that it was a good game for Charlie Lindgren. That's a big thing. And, I'm the first one to shoot the arrows, but I want to be one of the guys to give the applause as well when he plays well. And he played well in that game. Taking a peek here, he saved, 22 of 22. I don't think we could ask a whole lot more from him than that. Talking about Charlie here briefly, it is interesting about Lindgren. As Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren, both in contract years. And I know what the Elliot Friedman said, that the Capitals are all in on both netminders. Okay. Well, that is just something that you're saying because you ultimately don't want to make one of those netminders, hurt their feelings essentially. But I think the Capitals are all in on a guy like LT. And ultimately, I don't think the Capitals can sign Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren under contract. It's just going to be much too expensive. But, like I say, giving credit where credit's due, Charlie Lindgren has played well, but he's not as good as Logan Thompson, at least this year. So, a bit of a redemption for Charlie. And, you just take a look at the Capitals, all things considered. Talking about net minding is the big thing that stands out in this game, as it was kind of a nothing burger otherwise, is that it's going to be a difficult thing. Are they going to be able to get Logan Thompson under contract, considering what Shesterkin is making, Hellebuck, these kind of guys out there that are making bank? I think LT, it's going to be his job, and I think that it'll be Hunter Shepard or Clay Stevenson, or maybe some grizzled old vet as a backup next season. But Lindgren, LT, it is definitely must-see TV for the duration of the season.
Well, we at this podcast, when I say we, I mean me, largely, we don't much care for goalie controversies, especially manufactured ones. I think the fans, you talk about shooting arrows, I think the fans try to manufacture goalie controversies because of whatever. It seems to be a pastime of theirs, no matter who dons the mask and the pads. It's been a thing since as far back as I can remember, and here we are again. A new guy comes on the team, much like last year. New guy comes on the team and takes over pretty much the number one spot. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the alternating scenario, the 1A and 1B, whatever you want to call it, that has worked for me. I am probably in an ever shrinking minority in believing that, but I think the alternating the goalies, that strategy has worked. You do not necessarily need to declare a number one until you get much, much closer to the playoffs. But I'm hearing fans clamor for, well, let's just make Logan the number one and let's ride him until we get to the playoffs and even all the way through the playoffs, however long that lasts. Me, I say the opposite. Why wear out one guy when you're going to need both, especially when it comes to back-to-backs, and they're going to have at least a couple more in the season. But I think, obviously Logan has performed much better, as you said. Can't argue with that. But again, I think they need them both. And, you cannot overwork a goalie. Charlie proved that last year when they basically rode him the last dozen or so games without any rest. and it showed in the playoffs. He just pretty much was out of gas by the end of the Ranger series, and I don't want to see that happen again. So I, for one, support the alternating, but I don't know. I don't know if anybody out there agrees with me. You probably don't at this point, but I can see that this is a both things are true type of thing, but I have no problem with the alternate strategy. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my big thing on it is that, the Capitals are in crunch time right now. They're in first place right now, but that could change in a hurry. Say Carolina, say one of those teams went on a heater, that, the Capitals could be flailing. And, Logan Thompson has been lights out. Charlie Lindgren, you take a look at him before he got injured, was struggling a little bit. And, as far as my perspective on it is I don't think we're at the point of the season where we're going to put a guy in there just to get him in some work. That, for me is the mentality to take if your team, is maybe not in the thick of things. But the Capitals, I don't want them to feel like, that they are on top of the world when the whole thing could be a deck of cards if there was a major injury. Say, the Capitals are playing really well right now. Okay, go ahead and pull out PLD. Go ahead and pull out Protus, or even a worst case scenario, pull both of those guys out at the same time. How are the Capitals going to weather the storm? Oh, I know, we can call someone up from Hershey in Miroshnichenko or a lot. Oh, wait, we already tried that, and that didn't work so well. So the Capitals, if you want to take a look at a template of a team that is serious, it's the Carolina Hurricanes, about making big changes. That Rantanen deal, I mean, he is one of the best goal scorers in the NHL right now. And Taylor Hall, I'd rather take the Taylor Hall from, a handful of years ago than the current one, but whatever. That the Capitals, they have some good depth, but we've seen that depth. And save Ethan Frank, it really hasn't lived up to potential. We've seen glimpses of greatness from Ivan Miroshnichenko. LaPierre, I wouldn't be so upset if they traded him at some point. How many times are we going to try to retread that tire next year? Oh, no, check that. Next year. At some point, we're either going to need to use him or just view him as an asset to get a bigger piece. So I think that's the interesting position. To get all back to your point with the net minding, I'm wandering here a little bit, is that we can't squander games here, that we don't have that luxury, that we're on the top of the world right now. But ask the New York Rangers, if you want to talk about a rags to riches and a riches to rags story, that they started, President's Trophy winners. They were rock bottom a month ago. And guess what? They are winning games now. There's a distinct possibility that the New York Rangers, who were listed as DOA, very well could make it to the playoffs. This is a team that just got done trading their captain not long ago. So the Capitals cannot be complacent with how great they're playing right now. That could change in a hurry. The Capitals were able to weather the storm with Alex Ovechkin out, but again, if they faced multiple injuries, or say, look at what the Capitals looked like minus John Carlson a couple of years ago, it could be a game changer, and maybe not in a good way.
For sure. And so we've mentioned it several times. There's no sense ignoring it. The big blockbuster trade between the three-way trade between Carolina, Chicago, and the Colorado Avalanche. We'll get to that more in a bit, but there is. I'm beginning to think that given the sea change of fortunes with a lot of teams this year, that there may well be a day of reckoning with this roster, as whether or not we would like to see that or not. We'll talk about that eventually here a little bit later on. I got one more game to cover really quick, and that was this the one most recent last night in Vancouver against the Canucks, and it was the Quinn Hughes show. Basically, Quinn Hughes 2, Capitals 1 is what you can call this. So he scores the first one, his 13th. In the first at 12:23, Hoglander and Hronek with the assists on that one. Then he gets his 14th in the second at 1:24. Besser and Hronek on the assists on that one. That would be all they would need. That would be all there was in this game until Pierre-Luc Dubois hits double-digit goals this season, with Protas and McMichael on the assists at 12:31. Caps came to life at this point. Or slightly before, if you want to say. This was a tale of two games for me. The shot count says the Caps really, really tried. But if you actually watched the game, these were shots that weren't all that high danger, weren't all that threatening. The goalie for the Canucks, Lankinen, I'm pretty sure he saw every one of them, just about every one of them, except for save maybe the one that PLD got himself because he was right on top of him. And surprise, surprise, as you mentioned, Dan, net front presence crashing the net. That's how they scored their goal. Well, they, for some reason, decided to abandon that strategy for the first 45 minutes of this game. And I'm scratching my head to this point, wondering why. But, if you want to look at why their offense has suddenly struggled as of late, off and on. That's one key reason. Another is inconsistent play overall, but for some reason it just I cannot seem to understand why they just abandoned that strategy. Now the only thing I can think of is maybe Coach Carberry is thinking, all right, shake up the lines a bit, get different players in and out, get them used to playing each other. Maybe different mentality approaching the net is causing the deviance of strategy. I don't know, but it, I see the way that they play and they're getting the shots, but not the same production, obviously. And I'm not going to say this is the one reason, but it's a reason for sure, at least with me. What did you think when you saw how this game unfolded?
Well, listen, that Canucks team is flailing in a lot of ways. There's the whole JT Miller. There's a whole soap opera within the whole team there. Talk at the head coach there listed that game. I was listening to this on the NHL Network. They said a must-win game. Because they're at the juncture of their season that, there's some things that have worked well for them and some things that haven't worked well. And as I take a peek at the standings for them, they are in 5th place in the Pacific right now with 52 points, with the Oilers on top at 65. So that's the point that they're at. The Kraken, the horrible Kraken team, is one place underneath of them in 6th place. That I think there's going to be big movement with the Canucks as well. Just they're, I don't want to get into the soap opera aspect, but there's players that aren't getting along so well. That's why you saw the very best Canucks team out there. The Capitals also saw that with the Blackhawks. If you remember earlier in the season that Spencer Carberry said, you are going to see the best Blackhawks team out there, because some of these teams that are on the outside looking in, they want to play spoiler. Oh, we're playing the Capitals. Our season's over, but we're going to make them lose. It's about temporary victories, if you will. They know they're not going anywhere. But the Canucks, that's what you saw. The very best of that team. You saw a netminder that was dialed in, and you saw a team in the Capitals that had poor execution in their plays, poor passing, not a lot of tape-to-tape passing. And I think that sometimes for the Capitals, when they're under duress, it's the demons of old coming out, where it kind of turns into a bit more of a fight or flight kind of thing. But I wouldn't say it was a horrible game by the Capitals, and that's indicative by the box score. That Charlie Lindgren was Superman in the game and made a shortstop save out there. That was the highlight for me in the game. Otherwise, it was the PLD goal. But otherwise, walking away from that one, my big takeaway is, why am I watching a game after midnight? There's got to be some justice in the world. You see all the time where they adjust the time because they're playing. It's hockey night in Canada, so we got to move heaven and earth for that. How about the people that are living on the East Coast that are watching a game after midnight that have to work in the morning, for God's sake? So, that's my takeaway on the game. Not the Capitals' finest hour, but they're going to have their work cut out for them as the Calgary Flames are on deck, and they'll have LT back between the pipes.
So something that's been a concern of mine for a while, and one of the reasons why I sought you out, because I know you would be one of an ilk that would probably have observed this at some point with this team. But I have noticed that at times, when they faced a team that has some abundance of speed, some element of that, whether it's in one player like Quinn Hughes or it's in the whole team like Carolina, the Caps don't seem to fare very well against something like that, facing something like that. Would you or would you not agree with that?
Yeah, so I watched the game, and towards the end there, I was getting pretty tired, so I watched the replay of it this morning on my break at work. And the one thing I noticed about the game is they were cycling very well. The players kept moving, and I think that, to your point, that is what the Capitals struggle with. And I think that that's what part of their secret sauce, or maybe it's a sense of urgency to win games, is they were cycling very well. They kept moving, and it kind of kept the Capitals on their toes. Now, traditionally, or this season here as of late, they've kind of been able to shut down a lot of that. But I think there's enough tape out there that they know how to deploy enough countermeasures to thwart what the Capitals are trying to do. But that would be my biggest thing, is that they were cycling very well, and I think that was too much for the Capitals to handle.
Okay, I can definitely see it that way. I do think that I don't want to sound like I'm bolstering my own argument, but I think that, as and the numbers kind of back this up a bit, but ever since Ethan Frank, who has been long documented as, well, if not the fastest hockey player on the planet, at least one of them, I would put him in top 10 easily. Ever since he's been inserted into the lineup, they've matched up somewhat better against teams. It could have been a bloodbath this game. You mentioned Vancouver coming up with their best. Well, they certainly did. I would say if Quinn Hughes had more support, this could have looked a lot worse. But I would say even with Frank in the lineup, they still have some problems. But with him, they match up at least a little bit better. The problem is right now he's going to be on that third line and probably not matching up against the other speedsters. But I think, with him in the lineup, thank goodness they have their own bit of element. So I do like that. I would like to see a little bit more of him, but we'll see how that plays out. So we got a little bit of time left, and we alluded to the deal that was made earlier this week, the three-way trade with Carolina Hurricanes, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Chicago Blackhawks. And that resulted basically in one of our division rivals getting a hell of a lot better. Certainly a lot changed, but probably better, at least for the long and the short term. Bit of a gamble in getting Mikko Rantanen because he's a free agent that's going to command a big salary in the offseason. So there's probably little to no chance that they sign him, but they're going all in, I think it looks like, in this playoffs. So we talked about it. What would you have in mind, if anything, how the Cap should address this, given their current roster?
Well, the third line is the biggest question mark for me. I mean, listen, we've seen Milano there. We've seen Miroshnichenko there. We've seen Vrana there. That there's no real great option there. Ethan Frank has been that. I think I'm really excited. I want to see more. I know that he has the need for speed, but the good thing about him is he actually can put it in the net as well. And as far as Lars Eller is concerned, I was pretty excited. And, it kind of gave me those vintage vibes, the 2018. I could almost smell it in the air again. But he hasn't really lived up to what I had hoped for. And, you take a look at the teams that are doing really well. They have talent up and down. And there's still the glaring weakness that has been the weakness of the Capitals all season long. And it's the third line. First line, second line, fourth line, I have no problems with. The blue line is great. And, you take a look at the Capitals in net. Even if both of those netminders got injured, Hunter Shepard, Clay Stevenson, all the way down the pipeline, they're good. The third line is the most glaringly deficient line out there. I've heard, Yanni Gord. I've heard Brock, Nelson, these different players that could potentially Brock Nelson, excuse me, my notes froze up there, could be one of the players. Now, the problem therein is that's win now mode, like you referenced there with a Rantanen deal that they probably won't sign him. That's a sign that the Hurricanes are desperate to win. That they're not, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's a novel idea, isn't it? Winning hockey games and Stanley Cups. That's what it's all about. That's what the Hurricanes did. But like you said, Rantanen could go on for greener pastures, and now they're out Nashis and out, these other players. So the Capitals need to be, a little bit worried about this, because you want to bolster your team, but you don't want to give up prospects. I read a lot of blogs, as you can imagine, doing this show. And this was kind of out of left field blog. They said that the Capitals need to consider trading Ryan Leonard. And automatically I closed that window because that person was drinking or using some sort of substance. But that's what they need to do, is bolster that line, the third line. Hopefully, if they could get a player, it's a player that they could have some term to. Because if you're giving up something, you want to get something, but you don't want a player that's just going to be here for a few months. You think back to what comes to mind: Shattenkirk, Philip Forsberg, which is something that I shudder to speak of for quite some time. A deal that sent Martin Erat to this team, if memory serves, and Michael Latta. But that's what the Capitals need to be wary of. I want to bolster the team because I don't think they have the needed depth in Hershey, or not game-changing depth in Hershey. Who that player is, I guess I don't know. I've heard like the Brock Nelson, the Yanni Gore, just like everyone else out there. I do think that they need to button up that third line if they want to make a deep push, because then you take a look at what they have on the shelf there. They have Vrana, which, let's face it, that was just a feel-good story, and maybe that's it. And then you take a look at McElrath and Alexiev. Both of those guys, McElrath, I stand by 100%, but they don't got a lot of guys in the cupboard that they can open up if, stuff really hits the fan, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. I think it does. I mentioned a day of reckoning with this roster. It does bring that a lot closer, unfortunately, to the attention of the Brain Trust, Chris Patrick, of course, and Brian McClellan. Dan, how much time do you think you've got left?
I should actually bounce right now.
Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and send you off, and I don't want to keep you, so we'll exit you out, and I'll just wrap things up.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so we're going to wrap. And he's going to bounce now, and I want to thank him again for coming on with us. He's if you can catch him, he's on a podcast of his own, as I mentioned, the Locked On podcast and the Caps Minutecast as well. So do please be sure to catch those if you want to bolster your hockey knowledge. So we're going to continue here with that discussion now. I am not as I'm a little hesitant to it wouldn't be a blow up of the roster, but I'm hesitant to just make a deal. And as Dan said, it just seems kind of foolish a little bit to me anyway, to go get a guy for even as a rental. Brock Nelson doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Nobody as a rental makes a whole lot of sense to me unless you're swapping out a guy that's not going to be here next year. And well, you really ought to be, if you're going to do that anyway, you really ought to just let him walk when it comes to the off season. I'm not really sure what is the right course of action as far as changing the roster. I'm not going to pretend I do know. I'm not going to pretend I have that my finger on that pulse of the team. I do know this much. As I mentioned, Ethan Frank has injected some life into that third line. Is he the answer? Still too small a sample size to say for sure. But again, as Dan said, not only does he have some speed, he's got some skill as well. Could he be that permanent fixture? Yes. But we're only going to know given, more ice time, more games. I can also tell you this much. If you want a key stat to focus in on, that's easy to look up in your app. If you go into the box score in the app on each game and you highlight under game sheets, the game sheets section, when you go into each game, there's two tabs, one for each team. You go into Capitals tab, of course, swipe left in the list of stats for each player a little bit. You'll see something that says TOI, which stands for time on ice. Now, if you want to read into at least a little bit into how they're used, or easily how much they're being used, you need to look no further than that stat right there. So, for example, in this most recent game, Alex Ovechkin at the very top, 19 minutes and 50 seconds of ice time, of actual ice time that he was playing in this game. By comparison, Brandon Duhaime on the fourth line, 10 minutes and 5 seconds, the lowest. Now he's on the fourth line. Nick Dowd, 11:15, his line mate, same. So Ethan Frank, 10:53. Third liners usually, on average, a little bit higher than that. So what did Lars Eller? Let's look at Lars Eller. 12 minutes and 12 seconds. Okay, a little bit more, a little bit closer to the average, but still a little below. That means that, as Dan mentioned, the third line is not as trusted. And if you have to double shift other lines to compensate that, then they wear out a lot faster. So that's why there has to be something done. I don't know what that is. I'm not really sure if nothing is a better option at this point. I do know this much, though. I do not want to see a cherished prospect that is guaranteed to make a difference in this team's fortunes go the other way. I don't want that. And that does mean Ryan Leonard. At this point, Ryan Leonard, Andrew Cristall probably should be the two right now that are definitely off limits. Maybe throw in Ryan Chesley in there, probably the Caps' top defensive prospect. So, I don't know. I what the deal is. You want to play general manager, armchair general manager, fine. But what that deal should be right now, I really don't know. I don't want to break up this roster because overall they're doing so well. But when they get closer to the trade deadline, they're gonna have to figure something out if things continue to change, if they run into a slump, or like Dan said, they run into a rash of injuries that really change the team and everything starts going south, which, as we've learned, that can happen with this team. That can happen with any team this year. He mentioned the standings. Let's take a look at those standings, shall we? If I can get the app to cooperate. Okay, so in the East, where we actually care about. So right now, Caps are 7 up on the Carolina Hurricanes, 7 ahead at 71 points. Carolina sitting at 64. New Jersey sitting at 62, right behind them for the top 3 spots in the Metro. In the wild card, Boston at 56 points, Tampa at 55. Wasn't very long that Columbus was sitting pretty in the top wild card spot. Well, they're now out of it. If the season stopped today, they would be out of the playoffs at 55 points. Montreal right behind them. New York right behind them. The the Rangers right behind them. And as Dan said, they were left for dead. They've turned it around. They've won 7 out of their last 10, believe it or not. 6 out of their last 10. But, even so, they were left for dead. Detroit kind of hanging in there. I don't know. They've been playing better. They had a bad start, so they're looking better. And Philly with Tortorella, you never know what they're going to do. And then come the Islanders, then Pittsburgh, who we keep hearing they're going to make a big deal, but I don't know. Nothing happening just yet. And then you've got all the teams in the Atlantic that are going to be potential playoff, opponents. Toronto, Florida, and Ottawa are the top 3. Ottawa in third. Who saw that coming? Not many. Probably not many. But they're definitely a team to reckon with. They've been playing better, a lot better, especially of late. 7-2-1 in their last 10. So let's go ahead and flip the previews of coming attractions. So they continue the road trip for 2 more games next week. We'll cover those 2 games for sure, and that's Calgary on Tuesday, as we mentioned before, and Ottawa on Thursday to round out January. Then they come back home for a quick homestand Saturday, February the 1st against Winnipeg. And yours truly will be there alongside Well, I don't know if he'll go as Sacrum or as himself, Marcus Lemley. But either way, I will be alongside the host of the Sacrum's Capitals Off the Chain podcast, Marcus Lemley, Sacrum himself, watching that game live and in person. So that'll round out that week. And then a quick, short week before the Fornications tournament. No, I didn't say that wrong. That's how much I care about it. Florida, 7 o'clock puck drop, Tuesday the 4th. Philly, a stopover in Philly, run up to Philly on Thursday the 6th, and that's 7 o'clock puck drop as well. And then a matinee on Sunday the 9th, 12:30 p.m. puck drop against Utah, the whatevers they are's. And then they go on the long break thanks to that illicit cash grab tournament that I mentioned. And that'll be, I think, once we get to that point, that'll be a time where the brass is going to have to sit down and figure out what changes need to be made to continue, if not, well, by then turn around the fortunes. You never know what's going to happen. That's what makes this league so exciting. And if it's one thing I do agree with Dan, it could very well be that they hit an injury and they need a replacement. And that may be where a rental kind of fits. You're going to, throw in a spare part that is not going to be with the team long term to plug in a hole that pops up out of nowhere. If you're going for a rental during the deadline, that may be why, but we're going to have to see. But that long break is going to do them some good. Even though they haven't had to deal with too many back-to-backs here recently. Overall, I am optimistic about this team, but it's games like the Vancouver game that kind of give me pause every now and again and make me wonder, well, okay, if that team shows up for the playoffs, how much damage are they really going to do? That's why I still have a concern. All right. That's why I still say things like, hey, they need to match up against the fast teams because sooner or later they're going to hit one in the face, run into one, and it's not going to be pretty. Do you want to sit through a 4-game sweep this coming playoffs? I sure don't. So they damn sight better ice a lineup that can handle any type of team and win no matter what. And if it means trading, going out in the open market and making a deal, then you make a deal. Just not a deal where you mortgage the future, because the future is still in front of them. They're still technically in a retool, not a full-on rebuild, but they're still building the team. They're tooling the team for what it's going to be post-Ovechkin. You don't mortgage the future because you think you have a shot at the cup. Maybe you do that when you know you have a shot at the cup. You want to call this team a contender, fine, but they're not there yet. They're getting there. Not quite there yet. Look inside. You be really honest with yourself. As dominant as they are, that kind of game show up in the playoffs. I mean, if you really, really think about it, that's all I'm asking you to do. Take a good hard look at this team and realize what may be come playoff time. I love the regular season. I love the playoffs even more. The regular season, as we've come to find out, doesn't matter worth a crap in the grand scheme of things. It's just a training exercise for the big show, the real big show, which is the playoffs. All right? That's why we watch the games. And I encourage you to keep on watching the games. Thank you for those who have managed to stay up this week. I know a lot of you, it's tougher on a lot of you. I get that. Dan said it. He was, complaining about the 10 o'clock Saturday, start. I get that, but that's really because it's 7 o'clock in Vancouver. Yeah, maybe they could make it a matinee or something like that on Saturday. I don't know. Schedule makers certainly haven't been kind to the Caps. We've lectured on that a lot. I get that, but every team has to deal with it. So you deal with it however you can. All right, so I think we're going to stop here. So in absentia, I am going to thank Mr. Dan Holmi once again for giving us his time. And again, you can catch him on the Locked On Capitals podcast, his main show, and he's also on the Caps Minicast as well. And so be sure to catch him on that. As I said, you're a wealth of information. He's really, I think, one of the better podcasts out there if you're looking to keep up with the team and stay informed with how they're doing. Your casual fan, maybe not so much, but if you're like me and you're kind of hyper into the pardon me, the stats and how they're performing overall and the trends and all that, and and I'm not saying that just because I'm a fellow podcaster. I follow this team forever and ever and ever. So, all right. So I'm going to wrap it up here. And as I always do, going to remind you, as the Blue Liner, remind you that, well, I only seem to get sick on weekdays. So that means I must have a weekend immune system. Hallelujah, and let's go Caps.
This has been another episode of the Powerplay Point Podcast. All episodes are available from Apple Podcasts, the Podbean app, blueliner77.podbean.com, and now available from Stitcher. Music by Joe McAllister, voiceover by Jeffrey Conkle.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Powerplay Point Podcast. Thanks for listening.
Hey guys, it's Blue Liner on Point back with you, and we're going into this segment dedicated explicitly to the life of Pete Medhurst, and I wanted to do it this way because I wanted to do his life justice. It's a really tough thing to do. We kind of had some very limited in our time with our guest Dan Holmi, so I wanted to maximize that, but also, as I said, do Pete's life justice as much as we possibly can in the confines of this podcast. And well, what can you say? It's tough. I'm not to complain because not that I enjoy doing this, but it's kind of I've kind of come to accept it as my thing to try and for want of a better phrase, eulogize someone. But it's never as easy as it sounds. Sometimes it's really easy, sounds really easy for some folks, and then for others it's really, really hard because it's you can't believe that they're gone, and they had so much to do and they did so much, and especially when a guy like Pete, who a lot of us looked up to, and he's another one of those guys whose paths I wish somehow that they crossed, because what little I did interact with him, I am better for. But he's from the same county as me, Anne Arundel County in Maryland, same basic region. We shared the same interests, broadcasting and sports, and so I guess what I'm trying to say is don't be surprised if I fumble this a bit, but I will try and get this as best as I can. But please do forgive me for tripping over myself as I do it. So first, let me mention a few kind words from our own listener group. William Skiles said he grew up with Pete. They went to the same schools from middle school on. So he says, I grew up with Pete from middle school on. We lived in the same neighborhood together, and I remember him knowing all the stats and details to many different sports back then. I would call him Pete the Greek. He says, R.I.P. my friend. And if you younger listeners are wondering what that means, it's a reference to Jimmy the Greek Snyder. No relation to that Snyder. Used to be an odds maker. Used to be a guy give the odds on the on especially on the CBS NFL games before it became slightly taboo, and then became gambling, sports betting, especially online, became in vogue again. So some great stuff from him. Loretta Bryant, when we were in elementary school, we lovingly referred to Pete as Howard Cosell. Always knew he would grow up to follow his dream of broadcasting and be the best at it. He was a beloved member of the South County and will be missed by all. Thank you, Loretta. Let's I guess at this point, you want to do him justice. Let's run down a little bit, at least, of what all he did. When I met him, when I got to know him a little bit, he was the track announcer for the Rosecroft Raceway, where they have the harness racing. That's how I met him on Twitter. He had a Twitter account, and I friended him, and he passed along every now and again some tips on horses to throw some money at, and darned if more than half the time they came in, especially one of them in particular named Backstrom. And yes, that horse was named indeed after that beloved hockey player. But as I've mentioned, he's so much more than that. He covered Navy athletics, mainly Navy football, but I found out he actually did a swim tournament that Navy hosted with Rowdy Gaines, of all people. So there was that. He also did Nats baseball. He also did so many other things. But Navy football and Nats baseball were his things, and of course the Rosecroft Raceway was another. And so if you think about it, well, I saw somebody describe Mike Tirico as a Swiss Army knife as far as sports broadcasting. And if you think about it, Pete was kind of our local version of that. So it was nice to have somebody close to home that could do all that. And of course he was interested in the Caps, but he knew there was, there were guys who were already in the employ who were already killing it. Of course, like John Walton, who he knew, and Joe Beninati and everybody. But he kept up with him, and at his heart, I think this was probably the best thing I loved about him, is that at deep down to his core, in his heart, he was a fan first and foremost. He would be the one to tell us what was going on, describe the action. That was his job, but beyond his job, he was a fan, and I think that's the best way to approach things. And he did it well. He did it so well, so very well. And we're all going to miss him. I wish, I truly wish, I say this a lot about those that have departed us, but I really do wish that I met him at some point, actually met him at some point in life, because I ran across so many stories of his colleagues and interns and younger people that wanted to get into the business, that he was eagerly, he would eagerly give them advice and, tips, and, in one case arranged, things and such as auditions and, job interviews and things like that. That's just how he was, another pillar, another salt of the earth person that we've lost. It's so frustrating. It's already happened so many times this short year that we've already been in, but I don't know what else to say. I wish I did, but other than Pete, we're going to miss you, and your great voice will never be one that is silenced, ever. So we offer our condolences and our prayers and our thanks to your wife Brenda and your children, and we're going to attach the existing GoFundMe link to our show notes. It's still open. Do please donate to that. cancer's still a bitch. So, all right. So, thank you, Pete. God bless you. And there's a golden microphone in the sky, I know, that's waiting for you. So, thanks again, buddy.